Well, folks, it's time to kick it old school.
Hello, and in this video I'm building a British-inspired junction. Now, to be more precise on the location, this is a junction in the outskirts of London. So I guess it could be also called a London junction, but I felt British junction fit. Just it's a more encompassing name. These junctions are the design is very common in the south of England, so obviously especially in the London area with all the bus lanes and the protective curbs that I add. So I'll start talking about what's happening in the video. I am trying to basically fully customize the roads that I am using here. So I wanted to get the dipped impression, you know, that the standard vanilla roads have, where they sink into the ground. So I didn't use the highway roads because that would mean I would have to create all the pavements and all the curbs, and that's just a lot of work. So I thought I would try and do it with the sunken roads. So at first, I used Lost Gecko's retaining wall network to draw the curb, which I like because it's very easy to draw the angles that you like with the network. But I didn't like how bright it was. It wasn't a curb sort of design. This is just a basic retaining wall. It doesn't look anything like UK curbs or British curbs, where they tend to be cobblestones that stack on on the edge of the pavements to obviously stop the tarmac that is the pavement from collapsing onto the road. So they use cobblestone or just bricks. So that's why I end up using Ronix's curbs. Now these aren't perfect, and I think I'm going to be doing some tweaking, either trying to make my own, which I doubt that's ever going to happen, or more likely I'm going to use procedural objects and shrink Ronix's curbs down so they're, I don't know, 20% of the size they are now, and then save that as a new object so I can try and make them look more realistic, because at the moment they're just way too big and they don't really fit the sort of idea here. They just look too big and they look too out of place. So to get these roads to be the shape I wanted to, I had to use a bigger road and then shrink it down with the curbs and with the proppable pavement to try and create a more realistic looking road junction. You can see here I'm drawing a sort of inlet where I will eventually add a bus stop to the to that area. So obviously the main cars will drive on the road, and then that's just an inlet, and I'll use traffic precedent to make sure cars do not drive on the pavements and on the lanes that are not real lanes as such. Obviously this is a lot of work and could not be done for every junction within a city. It would just be way too much time. This junction took about I'd say 3 hours over 3 days. So it's 3 hours every day. So what, 9 hours to get it how I wanted to? Because I was trying to get as detailed as I possibly could within the limitations of the game. There are obviously big limitations to this game, but I tried trying new techniques, trying new different things, trying to more keep where the crossings are in the game itself so that they can actually be functional. Because I do tend to just forego the crossings and just do them where I want, but the only problem is when you do that and you just use a pedestrian path, people will just walk over it and they won't stop for traffic. So like with this junction, the people will actually stop for the traffic when they cross the road because it is just a normal junction, if not heavily modified to look completely different. So as you can see, I'm drawing the protective curbs and areas where the cars will have to maneuver around. Now obviously this is going to have to be where the cars will drive in the game itself. So if you're doing this, you have to let the simulation run and see where the cars are going to be, otherwise they will just drive through things because they're just following the path on the road. And there's only so much you can do with traffic precedent. It would be nice if there was a way to somehow get cars to drive a path over a junction like you draw, like completely freehand. But I'm not sure how useful that would be to everybody and how even possible it would be. So after I drew the curbs, I added in Sparks's like poppable asphalt that he's made, which is different textures. This one is a cobblestone texture. I just felt it fit the best in this area. In real life, in the junction that I was sort of looking at, they have a reddish brown sort of texture, but I didn't bother with that because I ended up using this crossing here as the actual like crossing for the people to cross. Now in real life it's not a brick, they literally just paint the road red, but there aren't very many decals or even these like poppable asphalt thing where the decal can go over the top. There aren't that many that fit very well, so you have to go with what you got. So we skipped ahead. I didn't record the top part of that where you saw I'd done most of the road because it is pretty boring. I thought I would just do it and see if it was possible and then basically go over what I did on the other side. So I'm using the Sparks poppable asphalt, poppable pavement. They're great, they allow you to put decals on top of them, and I use it as a bus stop. I created my own bus stop with decals because the one that is on the workshop is extremely light. I found that the decals that are for the UK are extremely faded in colour. I'm not sure if that's something to do with my game, but they are so faded it is very hard to see them. So I just used some faded yellow lines and just drew them myself basically to try and get them to look right and correct. Same as what I'm doing here with the taxi rank. And I also do something a little bit different. I have done before, and I've seen many other people do it before, most notably Hazard. I've seen him do it from the City Skylines Creators Discord. He's a mod over there. Links in the description. Come on over, check it out. He was the first one that I saw doing this quite a lot, where he would put the cars, he turned them into procedural objects, and then put them on the pavement, so they would be at a slight angle, and they would look more realistic. So I try and get a bit more complicated and get the car at a tilted angle, like imagining one wheel is up on the pavement and not the other. It looks okay. I did think that maybe I could move the wheel itself on its own if the procedural objects will allow it to make it look more suspension-y, but that's basically to a whole nother level of detail, which is really not necessary at all. Now get into the buildings. I only really decided to do this build after I saw a load of new English style buildings, or UK style buildings, pop up on the workshop. There are some by Rico, and he has made some really nice UK buildings. There aren't many on the workshop, so they fit in very nicely, and he's got a lot of shops and a couple of residential buildings. But I also use some other ones that aren't necessarily UK, but just fit in with the style of it. There is a lot of commercial buildings. There aren't very many high density residential. There's quite a few low density, which would look very nice, but maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place, but I couldn't really find any. So this is a more commercialized junction area. It's got a load of banks and a load of shops on either side of the road. So I found it was a bit bland, having just normal grey pavement. So I instead added this grey tiled pavement, which ended up making it look quite nice. But the only problem is with decals, it's hard to get around corners, and you can't obviously overlap decals because they will end up flickering and like Z-fighting with each other. So I only added them on straight bits, and then I used a M piece. I think it was Ronix's Zen Garden curb, which is just a white standard curb that I would cut off the decal, and imagine that is where they basically stopped putting down these special tiles and just basically pavement over it, concreted or asphalted over the rest of the junction. And also because I wanted to do the tactile pavement for some of the crossings, not all of it, even though probably in real life there would be all of it would have been done tactilely. I just felt it fit more with the junction maybe that was going through a transformation period, and they were slowly updating it. So the ones on the junction that I copied were red, so I just ended up using the red decals, shrunk Sparks' decals, shrunk them down, and with procedural objects, and made them fit and made them look like a tactile pavement. So I'm going through my list basically of all my assets and placing down as many assets as I can think that would be on a typical UK street. This involves railings, dustbins, bus signs, telephone booths, bus stops, signs in general, no parking signs, CCTV cameras, adverts for stuff. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is very accurate. I did put a load of rubbish out, so I'm just imagining this is the day before rubbish collection. The rubbish just fills in the gaps in between a lot of the places. I did notice also there was a load of wheelie bins and big dustbins in a selective area, so I piled a load of trash around them just to make it feel more vibrant and more alive, I guess. Also had a load of bikes, and I turned them as procedural objects and leaned them against railings. It's just a little thing, like the car, adds some detail, because bikes don't normally stand up perfectly straight next to railings. They're either leaning on them slightly, or just touching them. It adds a little tiny bit of detail, but obviously it does involve more work, so I have to turn them into procedural objects and then tilt them. What I also tilt is these, now I'm going to completely forget the name. They're basically the yellow bollards that show you which side of the median you have to be on. And if you've ever been to the UK, you know that these are never straight. They're never in place. People always hit them somehow. So a couple of these I put them at angles, and just to make it feel more realistic, I guess. You may notice also that there is a load of stuff just on the floor, like different coloured decals. Now what I'm imagining is these